The first punch never landed. That's the part people don't believe when I tell them. They expect me to say I froze, or I screamed, or I curled up and took it like every article about domestic violence tells you a woman is supposed to do. Instead, 3 days after I said I'd do it in a barn outside Asheville, with string lights overhead and my father crying in the front row, I caught my husband's wrist mid-swing and put him on the kitchen floor of our new apartment so hard he cracked a rib on the corner of the cabinet. His name was Grant. Mine is Dana Whitfield. Whitfield again now, not Cole. But I'll get to that. I want to tell you how a man who spent 8 months being charming enough to marry turned into someone swinging a fist at my face over a missing gift card. And I want to tell you what happened after, because the after is what matters. The punch is just where the story starts. It's not where it ends. My dad, Roy, was a corrections officer for 22 years outside Knoxville. When I was 7, he started teaching me things in our backyard that other dads taught their sons: how to fall without hurting yourself, how to get out from under someone bigger, how to turn your hip into a strike instead of your fist. He never called it self-defense. He called it just in case. I thought it was a game until I was maybe 13 and asked him why he never taught it to my older brother. Your brother's a boy walking through the world, he said. You're a girl walking through it. Different world, same feet. I didn't understand what he meant until I was 31 years old on my kitchen floor with my husband's rib giving way under my forearm. Grant and I met at a conference in Charlotte. He sold industrial hip-back equipment, had a laugh that filled up a room, remembered the name of waiters. My friends called him a catch. My dad, when he met him at Thanksgiving, shook his hand a bit too long and later told me quietly doing dishes. He talks about himself like he's already won something. Watch how he talks about people who tell him no. I told my dad he was being overprotective. I was 30. I had 2 long relationships that fizzled from boredom, and here was a man who planned dates 3 weeks out and texted good morning every single day without fail. I didn't have the category in my head yet. For what? Watch how he talks about people who tell him no would end up meeting. The wedding was small, 60 guests, my mother's church friends and his co-workers from the Charlotte office. If you watch the video, and I still have it, I haven't deleted it, you'll see a man who cried during his vows and held my face like I was something he couldn't believe he had kept. You'll never guess. The trouble started over money, which I've learned is almost always where it starts, even when it isn't really about money. We had gotten a lot of cash and gift cards from the wedding, about $4,000 total once I added it up, plus a $600 gift card to a home goods store from my Aunt Carol. I'd put everything in a drawer in a guest room while we figured out the joint account paperwork, because we'd actually agreed out loud in posh mental counselling, that the biggest financial decisions would be joint decisions from day one. 3 days after the wedding, I went looking for the gift card because I wanted to order a KitchenAid mixer before our sale ended. It wasn't in the drawer. Neither was about $1,100 in cash. I asked Grant if he had moved it. He was standing at the counter eating cereal, still in a grey t-shirt he slept in, and something in his face changed before he even answered. A kind of stillness, like a door closing. I used some of it, he said, for the truck payment. I'll put it back. You used the wedding gift card money without telling me. It's our money. Dana, it's our money that we agreed we decided on together. That was 3 days ago. You didn't even wait 3 days. He set the spoon down harder than he needed to. Don't do this. Don't turn this into a thing. I want to be honest about something. I almost let it go. That's the part I'm least proud of. I had this instinct. This old, worn, smooth instinct to smooth it over, to not be the wife who makes a scene 3 days into marriage. I actually opened my mouth and said, okay, just tell me next time. And what came out instead, because I was tired and it was our first real fight as married people, and I didn't know yet what I was dealing with, was, you don't get to decide that and then tell me not to make it a thing. He crossed the kitchen faster than I'd ever seen him move, and he swung. I didn't decide to fight back. That's the truth I kept coming back to. The thing I still overturned. There wasn't a moment where I weighed my options. My body simply did what my father spent 20 years putting into it. I turned, I caught his wrist. Instead of eating the punch, I used his own momentum against him, and he went down on the tile hard enough that his ribs hit the edge of the lower cabinet. On the way, he made a sound I've never heard a person make. Then he just lay there holding his sides, staring up at me like I was the one who had done something inexplicable. I called 911 with my hand shaking, but not from fear. I want to be clear about that. I was shaking because everything in me was still on, still ready, and it had nowhere to go. The paramedics took him to urgent care. 2 responding officers stayed with me in the apartment, and a female officer, Sergeant Alvera, sat me down at the kitchen table and asked me to walk through it slowly twice. She wrote things down. She asked if I wanted photos taken of anything, and I said I wasn't hurt, and she said gently, "That's not unusual. Sometimes there's nothing to photograph from the person who didn't get hit." At urgent care, Grant told the taken nurse he'd fallen. Then apparently when the doctor asked more questions, because a fractured rib from a simple form didn't quite add up with a bruising pattern on the forearm, he changed the story to say his wife had attacked him out of nowhere. The doctor, per hospital policy, made a note and the responding officers followed up. That's how I found out 2 days later that Grant had filed for a restraining order against me, not the way around. I still remember sitting in my car outside the courthouse with the paperwork in my lap, my hands cold despite it being July, thinking he swung first and somehow I'm the one who has to prove it. This is where I have to tell you about Marisol. Marisol lived in the apartment directly below ours. We'd said maybe 6 sentences to each other before that day. Hallway pleasantries, a small complaint about the elevator, but her kitchen window faced a little courtyard between our building, and open windows in July meant sound travels. She heard the whole thing, not just the fight. She heard him say, "Don't do this. Don't turn this into a thing the way you say," someone said before, worn smooth by repetition, and something about that made her stop washing her dishes and listen. She heard the crash. She actually heard the building front desk before I called 911, worried enough to want someone else to check. When the restraining order hearing came around, Marisol volunteered to give a statement. I hadn't asked her to. She told the officer who took her account something I didn't learn until later. In the hearing itself, she recognized Grant's voice from an argument in the courtyard 6 weeks before our wedding, an argument with a woman who wasn't me. She said she hadn't thought much of it at the time, figured maybe a friend, sister, who knows. But she remembered him saying almost the exact same words, "Don't turn this into a thing." I hadn't known there had been anyone before me at all, not really. Grant told me his last relationship ended 2 years before we met. 2 years turned out to be generous. It turned out to be more like 6 weeks turned into overlap, and the woman whose name I still don't know had no interest in learning, filed a police report against him 8 months before our wedding for shoving her during an argument. You appreciate this. Money had been taken from a joint account she didn't know had open access to. None of that came from me digging. It came out because the county attorney's office cross-referenced Grant's name when his restraining order petition got flagged for review. Standard procedure when the responding officer's report and the petition's account don't line up. My dad said, always liars don't usually get caught, but by someone smarter than them. They get caught by paperwork. The hearing itself took 40 minutes. Grant's attorney argued I was the aggressor. My attorney, a woman named Priya, who my cousin had used for her own divorce, and who took one look at Sergeant Alvero's incident report and said, "This is going to be fine, Dana, I promise you," laid out the timeline, his admission to the officers on scene that he'd reached out for her, the inconsistencies between his false story and his attack story, Marisol's statement and the police report, where the judge allowed it as relevant to the pattern. The judge denied Grant's restraining order. Then, and this is the part one didn't see coming, she asked if I wanted to file one of my own. I looked at Priya. Priya nodded small, like she'd hoping I would ask. I said yes. I filed for divorce 11 days after the wedding. 11 days. My mother cried on the phone, not because she blamed me, but because she kept saying, "You just got married, you just got married," like the calendar itself was a tragedy. My dad didn't say much. He drove 4 hours from Knoxville the same day I called him, sat at my kitchen table, the same tile floor, and just put both hands flat on the surface like he was studying it all himself. "I taught you that stuff so you never had to use it," he finally said. "Not so you would." "I know, Dad. You okay?" And here's the honest answer, the one I gave him. I don't know yet. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't triumphed. I was mostly just tired and a little embarrassed, turning over 8 months of a relationship in my head, trying to find the moment I should have seen it, and coming up mostly empty, because he really had been careful, really had been good at being exactly what I wanted, until the exact moment he didn't have to be anymore. There's no dramatic courtroom scene where Grant breaks down and confesses everything. That's not how it went. He just got a plea deal on a lesser charge related to the incident. Mandatory anger management classes, a fine, no jail time, which frustrated me for about a week until Priya reminded me that the goal was never revenge. The goal was documentation and distance, a paper trail that would exist if he ever tried this with someone else. The divorce went through 6 months later, uncontested in the end, because his attorney told him. I heard this secondhand through a mutual acquaintance, who still felt loyal enough to Grant to relay it and disloyal enough to me to relay it anyway, that fighting it would mean reopening the whole restraining order in discovery, and he didn't want that following him. The wedding gift money minus what he'd already spent got split according to what the judge considered fair enough who contributed what. I got the KitchenAid mixer for what it's worth. I bought it the week the divorce finalised, alone at full price, no sale, just because I wanted something in that kitchen that belonged only to me and had no history attached to it. I moved out of that apartment within a month of the hearing, found a smaller place across town. First month I lived completely alone since college, and I remember standing in the empty living room before the furniture arrived thinking I should feel like a failure, and mostly just feeling like I could finally hear myself think, Marisol and I are friends now. She never made a big thing out of what she did. When I tried to thank her properly months later over coffee, she just shrugged and said, I've been the person no one believed before. Wasn't going to let it happen twice in one building. I still think about my dad's line more than anything else from that whole year. Different world, same feet. I used to think it was about being ready for a stranger in a parking lot. Same faceless danger from outside. I didn't understand until I was 31 that sometimes the world you need to be ready for is the one you let into your own kitchen, and the one who cried during his vows and meant it probably in whatever limited way he was capable of meaning things, right up until the moment he didn't get his way. I got remarried to my maiden name before I got remarried to anyone else. Whitfield, my dad's name, the one he gave me, along with everything else he gave me without ever making a ceremony of it. I'm not anti-marriage, not bitter in the way people sometimes expect when I tell this story. I dated again carefully, slowly, and I'm with someone now who has never once, not in 3 years, made me feel like caution was an insult to him. But I keep the story because it's worth feeling honest. Not a story about a woman who got even, but about a father who spent 2 decades preparing his daughter for a moment he prayed she never needed, and a daughter who, when it came down to it, didn't have to decide what kind of person she was going to be. She already knew her body just had to catch up to what her father had been teaching her all along, that surviving something isn't the same as deserving it, and that the people who love you best sometimes show it years before you understand why.